Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on a Friday morning. The Bryans are here. Mary Catherine's off on her honeymoon. Tori Clark's in the house. We're pleased to be joined now by Shannon Bream from the Fox News Channel, host of America's News Headquarters, Sunday from 12 to 2. Also filling in for Brett Baer tonight on Special Report. You can check her out 6 o'clock on the Fox News Channel. Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning, gentlemen and lady.
Good morning.
So you cover the Supreme Court. That's one of your beats. I'll have to ask you, everyone says it's going to be 4-4 when it comes to the health care law, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to be Justice Kennedy making the decision, our de facto super president, because he always makes these final decisions on what's constitutional, what's not. Is it possible that one of the other justices may go the other way? And if it is possible, who might that be?
Well, I mean, really anything is possible, because when you really get down to it, there are so many different issues that are going to break out. I mean, you know that normally an argument at the court's an hour, and they're giving 5.5 hours. I mean, we couldn't find anything else like that in modern history. And so it's not just the mandate itself, which I think predictably will be a 5-4, but there are these other issues pertaining to the whole dispute as well. Severability, can the rest of the law stand without the mandate on its own? Also, a portion of the argument is about whether some of these states brought the suit prematurely, whether they have to actually suffer some kind of damage before they could get to the suit itself, and another Medicaid issue. So there are a lot of things that are going to happen with this case, and we may see part of it 5-4, part of it could be 7-2. You just never know. Okay,
so it's possible that they could rule it unconstitutional, but because there's no severability clause, they could say that the rest of the bill is thrown out, or they could say, no, that's not the case, the rest of it stands.
Right, they could say, even without the mandate, with that ripped out of the middle of it, we see a way that the rest of the law can survive.
But from a political point of view, there's really no way you can fund it if there's no mandate, per se.
Yeah, and that's the chief argument. And even at one of the lower court arguments, some of the attorneys for the administration acknowledged it would be really tough for the rest of the law to survive if you take away the mandate.
I want to talk politics a minute. 2012 GOP nomination process. We were just looking at a poll that shows Newt's got about 32% support in the state of Iowa among likely caucus goers. And if you look down the path, that's about the same margin that Romney has in New Hampshire. So let's assume, and it's not really safe to assume this, but assume for the moment that these polls sort of solidify, and it turns out to be Gingrich in Iowa, and it turns out to be Romney in New Hampshire. It's going to be very interesting from there on.
It could be, and it could turn out to be something like we had with the Democrats last time, where their primary was unsettled months into the primary process, their nominee still unknown. And there's been a lot of chatter that that's exactly what the GOP wants this time, some of the GOP leadership, that they want these candidates to be very battle-tested, and for there to be a split, not that somebody comes in, wins the first 3 or 4 big states, it's done, and they're done with their primary campaign by February. There are some who say that they thought the Obama-Clinton extended Democratic primary last time around was a good thing for really vetting them out and seeing who was going to be the stronger candidate head-to-head with the GOP, and that some within the RNC really wanted that to happen this time around with the GOP as well. It could get bloody.
Yeah, and it could be a long fall. But yeah, I think that's right. And not only does that, it allows many other Americans to sort of weigh in. Yeah. It's not just 1 or 2 states. It's a lot of states will get to weigh in if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know that Florida snuck up and sort of upset the fruit basket with the entire calendar, because they felt like just about every other state out there does, that they are one of the key states that they need to have a voice. So they snuck up to January. But if you get into March, there are, scores more primaries where people who say, normally I don't really have a voice in this whole thing, my votes are still going to count possibly at that point. So it could be really interesting, because as you guys know with this poll this morning, I mean, earlier this week we had an Iowa poll from Bloomberg that showed a 4-way tie at the top.
Yeah. A lot of volatility.
Very different.
Yeah.
It's a few days later. So, yeah, a lot of volatility.
Shannon, do you see my favorite topic, national security, playing a role in this election at all, whether it's the Republican primary process or when we get to the general election?
I think it has to. I think, of course, just the reality of day-to-day American life, people are most concerned about the economy, but I think they have a lot of questions about this president, his particular take on foreign policy, and within the GOP field, whether some of these folks are actually up to handling the very tough questions in those 3 a.m. phone calls. We've seen a number of them stumble on those issues, and generally in the past, a lot of people think that the GOP does very well with foreign policy. They're very strong on it. They're very sure on it, and there have been some stumbles within the field So I think in the primary process and in the general, it will still be a very hot topic.
Hey, C-SPAN and Brian Lamb want to put cameras in the courtroom at least they want cameras in the courtroom all the time for the Supreme Court, but they specifically said, hey, just for this case when it comes to the health care law. And apparently Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Grassley, bipartisan support, are in favor of it as well.
There's an unholy alliance for you.
Well, what do you think the chances of the Supreme Court saying, okay, for this one particular case, we'll allow cameras in the courtroom? What are you hearing?
I think it's really, really small. I'm not going to say there's no way it happens, but, Justice Souter, when he was still on the bench, famously said a few years ago that the cameras would roll in there over his dead body. He was obviously a huge opponent of that. He's gone. And the two most recent justices, Sotomayor and Kagan, in their confirmation hearings, they seemed at least open to the idea, but ultimately it would rest with the Chief Justice and with the discussion among the justices. And they have fought it tooth and nail. It's never happened before. Nothing's ever been televised before at the court, not even the whole Bush v. Gore, landmark historic dealings and case. But this is different. It's something that will impact our economy and the way that we view medicine in this country for generations to come.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying there's no chance, but my sense is that the feeling there remains we don't need cameras in this court.
Well,
we can petition for oral, just the audio, and I think we have a better chance of getting that.
Well, I mean, one hears that one of the people against this would be Associate Justice Antonin Scalia. One also hears through the grapevine that Antonin Scalia listens to this show in the morning.
Good morning, Justice.
So, Justice Scalia, I'm just saying, you might want to think about these things. Just, consider it. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, you're going to change his mind, Brian.
No,
I don't see why not. Brian seems to be very persuasive.
I can be persuasive.
All right, Shannon, good to have you on, and we'll be watching tonight. Also, you're interviewing Rick Perry's wife tonight, right?
I am. I'm going to interview her this afternoon. One of the first times she's actually sat down in a formal interview, and I think it's always interesting to folks to see the women behind the candidates, and we'll have a sneak peek of that today.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for coming on, as always.